MassArt's Tuesday Talk lecture series, which we have established since 2008. Don't do the math. And this is our first virtual talk. We usually do them in person, as I was explaining to our speaker, with food and various snacks. So the department will owe you all that stuff at some point in the future when we're fully in person and not doing these remotely. But my name is Paul Hajian, and I'm the head of the graduate program of architecture here and a former chair and a faculty member at MassArt and a practicing architect. And I'm very excited to welcome our speaker today, Brett Rhode, who really represents a building type and a body of work that is in some ways unlike some of the speakers we've had talk to us, who have focused on more maybe low rise and more residential and smaller scale building types. And we're really excited to have him. And so there is a benefit to this Zoom process, which allows him to be, I believe, either near a high rise or somewhere up in the stratosphere while I'm in my daughter's bedroom. Who she's moved out, by the way. It's not a problem. She lives and works in Brooklyn. So, and I want to welcome everybody, some faculty and students and outside guests. And we will manage the wait list and let folks in as they come. I want to say just a little bit about Brett. We titled this series this year called we call them Fields. And the word fields represents fields of, could be in discipline, could be fields of color, could be fields of design. And it's a broad category that's meant to excite some of speakers and have them tap into their own experiences. And this year, and for this talk, Brett Urban Fields, and titled this talk, Redefining Cities with High-Rise Design, and is going to show us really 3 examples of the work that he has been focused on as well. And I'm just going to say something briefly about Brett, which, pardon me for reading, but I haven't memorized it. Brett Rhode is well known for his ability to design and manage large, complex projects, producing award-winning designs for over a decade within budget and schedule constraints. In fact, more than a decade. Brett honed his skills in New York City on international commissions in the offices of I.M. Philip Johnson, and in Austin as vice president of Page Sutherland Page. Brett worked healthcare and civic projects for 8 years before founding his own firm, Rhode Partners, in 2005. Rhode Partners is organized in an open studio environment to facilitate team communication and client access. It's an award-winning full-service architectural firm specializing in planning, architecture, and interior design. Of experience in delivering high-quality civic, multifamily, residential, hotel, office, and retail projects with timeless materials and longevity. The firm thrives on collaboration to transcend traditional production silos, and Rhode Partners' team of collaborators, thoughtful professionals, share their expertise in navigating municipal permitting processes and utilizes the latest in modeling and construction software to streamline communication across disciplines and fields. We're excited, as I say, to welcome Brett to our lecture series and to kick us off this act as we come back to our schools. And I want to give you a very warm welcome from Mass College of Art and Design and also Boston Design Week as part of this multidisciplinary kickoff the week intense design in the city and college. Welcome, Brett.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for inviting me. I'm in Austin, Texas, so a long way away from you all. I'm assuming everybody's somewhere around school up there, but maybe not. Maybe there's some remote people as well. We're all sort of back to work here in our office. We have about 25 designers, and we're in downtown Austin. You kind of see behind me. You can see a little bit of downtown Austin. I can probably move my camera around and see a little bit more. And actually I'm seeing the shade is down behind me. So I want to make sure that view, this is going to be very dramatic, where I kind of show you the unveiling of Austin, Texas. So here goes, if I can get it to work. No, oh well. You'll have to just, I guess, just, there we go. There it goes. Like Paul was talking about large scale projects, and I'm sure in school y'all are probably not exposed to a lot of bigger scale projects. I remember when I was in school at the University of Texas here, a lot of really small projects, and didn't really think much about working on a high-rise building. But over time, I got more acclimated to it. I got to work on some big projects in New York City at some big firms, and then as I moved back to Austin, lived in New York City for a long time, moved back to Austin, and came here just about the time Austin was sort of taking off, and so I was able to get involved in some new projects and some new downtown urban living projects. People started to think about living downtown, and so I was involved in one of the, I guess maybe the first apartment tower in downtown Austin, which was all of about 12 stories at the time. But since then, we've gone on to do, now we have the tallest building in Austin. I'm going to show you in a few minutes. It's called the Independent, but with our own firm here. So it's been quite an odyssey. It's taken a long time to get the expertise and gather the talented people that I work with here. But we're having a lot of fun. So I want to show you these three projects, urban fields. So when I think about that, I think about the different locations. We're in all three of these projects are in urban environments. Two of them in Austin. One of them in San Antonio, which is just about an hour and a half or so south of here. Beautiful city, but very different locations in the sense that these sort of specific locations within these cities is really dictating and driving the design for these projects, and in a very kind of real ways and very impactful ways. So even though we're in a big urban region, Austin, San Antonio, all three of these projects have very specific drivers behind them. So I want to go ahead and share my screen and go into talking about some of these projects. So the first off, I'll show you, this is a little bit of how our office looks. We're on the 16th floor of an old office building in downtown Austin. It's built in the 70s, and we've kind of stripped everything out and turned it into a big kind of studio space. So this is Austin. A number of you have probably been here. If you haven't, come visit. It's a really cool town. But we have a river running through Austin, and we're very close to that river. It's called Town Lake, or Lady Bird Lake now. So we did a project. It's been built, it's finished a couple of years ago. It's called the Independent, and it's a 58-story residential tower. Tallest building currently in Austin. There are a couple of other projects that are coming now that are going to be even taller, but for now it's the tallest, and as you'll see, it had a pretty big impact on the skyline from an architectural point of view. So this is the building, and it's just a little bit over my left shoulder here out. I can see a little bit of it here still, although my view is getting blocked by other projects that are being built. Some of them are ours, ironically. So the project was built on a brownfield site that was owned by the power company here in Austin, and so there was a lot of things that were left on this site, including underground utilities, that constrained our ability to use the entire site. There was also a downtown creek called Shoal Creek, which borders the two sides of the site, and that the creek actually had some setback requirements from the zoning, so that the idea is to prevent tall buildings to be built very close to the creek edge, and make it bring the scale down for people that are walking on Shoal Creek. So that left us with a pretty small footprint to use, and so our strategy was to used to the control, a little bit of a lag. Our strategy was to make a very compact core for this tower. It's almost like a sliver building like you've seen in other cities. But this one's a little bit different because it has some things going on that allow us to achieve our building program and also have a very efficient floor plan by having a very strong structural center core. You can see it here. It's a black, bold, highlighted. That's all concrete, and it runs continuously from the bottom of the building all the way to the top. So I'm going to back up here because I think I skipped over an important slide. So the building, the way it was organized, we had a program that called for several different types of apartment units. This is a full residential building with a little bit of retail on the ground floor and some parking down below, but it's all apartments. And so, you know, in terms of accommodating the owner's program for these units, they gave us probably 8 different unit types, you know, the typical, you know, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedrooms, and so forth. But they wanted to be able to have these apartments to be on different levels and oriented in different ways. And so normally that requires you to have a pretty complicated building because you're taking floor plans and you're kind of moving them around the building and they don't stack, and it can get a little chaotic. So we developed a way to develop 4 tiers of the building and be able to use these units by rotating the tiers and also mirroring the tiers. So the way it works out is we had a limited number of unit types, but they were oriented in different ways in the building. And one unique thing that came from this is that the floor plates are biased to one side. And so when we do this operation, it creates these offsets in the building. And so here you can kind of see the building, the core is not exactly in the center of the overall building footprint. And what that does is when we mirror and rotate, it creates these shifts in the building. So it's a way that we develop to limit the kind of complications of the floor plans, having them in different, individually oriented in different ways, but rather taking the whole floor plate and using that, orienting the entire floor plates to be able to achieve these different views and different heights for different units. And structurally, the way we handled that was with outrigger tension rods to carry the floor plates as they shifted. And so these appear in the units themselves. And then we have an intermediate amenity level that actually projected out quite a bit further using the same technique structurally. And so this is a shot of level 34 amenity level with which cantilevers 30 feet off of the building and utilizes these steel struts that run throughout the building. So here you can get a better feel with this section on the left-hand side, which shows the stiff core, which runs completely uniformly vertically, and then the shifting that occurs, the offsets that occur on either side. And so if you see when the tier offsets, you'll see that there are struts on that side of the offset. So that is the structural scheme to achieve these cantilevers without introducing additional columns. Also on level 9, there's an amenity level with a pool, which turned out really well. It sort of cantilevers off the side, sits right on top of the parking garage. You know, the other floor plates are very similar, but they do shift. Level 34 is an amenity level again, and it cantilevers off the building. I'll show you some more shots of that in a minute. This is the ground floor lobby, and interesting thing here, one idea on the right, you can see the concrete core coming down. This is the actual structure for the building that runs completely up to the top. You know, in buildings like this, because we had 346 apartments, a lot of people living here, they still need to get the mail somehow. You wouldn't think that these days, but people still have to get mail. So mail rooms have gotten huge on our projects. And so in this project, we decided to sort of just go ahead and make the lobby into the mail room and use the mailboxes as some sculptural elements. This is a typical shot. This is one of the amenity spaces. We did the interiors here as well. And this building has a couple of unique spaces. This is a kids' playroom, which was a lot of fun. It has a little outdoor area next, right outside of it that, kids can go out and play in a pretty safe urban environment. And this isn't a shot of the main entrance of the building, which you can see the parking garage levels above, but the main lobby on the corner. And this is what I wanted to get to, because this is the dog lounge, and it's actually immediately adjacent to the kids' playroom. And so, you have people with dogs and people with kids, and it's sort of, it's sort of all works out. Again, on the left, you can kind of see these steel struts, which do a lot of achieve a lot of the structural gymnastics here with these cantilevers and offsets. Here you can kind of look down and see the beautiful river we have flowing through Austin. Okay, so the next project is also in Austin, and it's actually a student housing project, and close to University of Texas. It's university is immediately to the left in this picture, and this area is called West University and University neighborhood, and it's really quite something what's happening here. I don't know if this is happening anywhere else in the country, but we've done, I was counting them last night, we've done 10 projects here over the last 5 years, 6 years, and 3 of them have been tower projects, and 2 of them are in this photograph here. The one on the building on the left, which has the kind of vertical stripes, that's one of our projects. And then the one I want to talk about is this one that has this slanted front and the gridded perforated facades. So at the corner, you can see the building works around a historic house that was on site, and so that was kept in place. This project, had one very big zoning constraint, and that is a 70-degree sky exposure plane on the north side of the building only. And so the result, when we first got this project, we kind of panicked, because we were thinking, well, how do we handle something that is just so such a kind of superfluous, I suppose you might say, really constraint, but will have such a huge impact on the entire north side of our building. And here you can see, kind of in relation to where we were before at the river, which is down on the lower part of your screen, you can see where this project is, close to the University of Texas. But in working through it, we decided to try to work with that 60, 70-degree angle, and work with the facade to try to bring that constraint into the design picture, if you will, and use it as a driver. So the building, the ground floor, you can see on the left-hand side, the old historic building is in the corner on the lower left. It has an underground parking garage, and it has about, I think, 600 apartment units for students. Many of them are 3 and 4 bedroom. But again, this is just showing how the facade fenestration worked and the angle working in. We did some parametric modeling and had some modular panels, fabricated CNC for the facade here, and kind of worked with the very odd constraint. And this is going to be the only building in University of Texas West campus that is actually worked with this sky exposure plane, because immediately after this building started, they changed the rules and got rid of the 60-degree sky exposure plane, and so but I'm happy that we had the constraint, because it did drive the architecture for the project. Section. And another nice thing is there were some beautiful interiors. This is lobby down on the ground floor, but in the lower left-hand corner is one of the units that is on that sloping glass front. And so, there's some really beautiful spaces that came out of this. This driver, this unique requirement for this particular site. Another part of this project was that we worked on a good bit is making these sort of bed boxes. So they're like little enclosures, almost like being on a train car or on an ocean liner. Again, floor plan. This is the top floor where we have a pool and with some great views over the Austin skyline. So moving on to, Paul.
I just wanted to ask you where the sky exposure plane, where did it come from? Like you had said, how long was it adopted for? Like what was the logic behind it?
Right. Well, when this entire area went through a big upzoning, which is a really good thing, because there were just so many people commuting to UT. UT is a huge school. I think they have 70,000 students, and so many people were being bussed in from other areas around the city, or even different neighboring cities. And so there was just a lot of commuting, and it was creating a lot of congestion. And so the city decided to just sort of face reality, and basically this entire district, which is pretty big, this is only a small part of it I'm showing you, was upzoned, and that was probably in 2008, something like that, maybe around 2008. So it's been a little over 10 years, and the original zoning rules had a requirement for a 70-degree sky exposure plane, but only on the north side of the block. So if you had a building that was oriented to the south, you didn't have to do it. Only those buildings that were oriented north. And the idea is that they were the people that wrote the rules were thinking about getting light down to the street and having the southern light be able to reach the streetscape and provide for sun and more daylight. And so that was where it came from. But like I said, no one ever attempted to actually build to it. A lot of parcels were left unbuilt because of this. You couldn't get there. Some of these sites are so small that if you apply this angle, there's really nothing left. So they decided to go ahead and do away with that provision actually earlier this year. So anyway. So this next project is in San Antonio, and again, very unique situation. San Antonio has a beautiful river called, it's the San Antonio River, but it's also referred to as the River Walk. And it was something that was done in the 1930s and as part of the Works Progress Administration, WPA project. And So the city basically decided to beautify their downtown, and one of the things they did was dammed the river, the San Antonio River, and created a kind of a tributary, if you will, that became known as the Riverwalk. So quite famous. And this plan, you can see it. I'm pointing at it. The river runs around and comes back through and ties back into the main river. And there are floodgates that control the amount of water. And if there's flooding, those gates will close so that this tributary doesn't flood out. Pretty interesting. And all of this was done back in the 1930s. But the history of the San Antonio River goes way back, and there are plenty of beautiful old photographs and paintings and from the 1800s showing what the river looked like back then. And so there's just a tremendous amount of history. Our site is the lower left is a picture that was taken before we started. And so our challenge for this project was to absorb this history, but also follow all the rules that have been developed over the years about how to build a building on the Riverwalk, which is, it's a challenging thing, and it's kind of rare. Not a lot of people, not a lot of tower projects are built anymore down on the Riverwalk, but one of our guiding documents was this plan that was done in the 1930s as part of the Works Progress Administration by an architect named Robert Hugman, known as the Hugman Plan. And so he, as an architect, he documented the river and came up with some beautiful ideas to put in pedestrian walkways and bridges and walls, and all very, very nicely done, and much of it's still intact. And obviously everyone is wanting to preserve anything that is still there, that is left from the Hugman Plan. Our building, so you can see in the white, the white icon is our building and how it actually interfaces with this old plan from the 1930s. So a big part of this was there are these stone walls that were built at that time along the sides of the river, and these were ostensibly to prevent flooding. And so when the river, if it ever did flood, people wanted to be able to protect these buildings that are on either side of the Riverwalk. And so this is the upper image is what is there today. Some older buildings that were really not of very good quality. They were pretty run down, which we got permission to remove, but the wall was sacred. And knowing that we wanted to actually interface with the river from our new building, we agreed to investigate this wall, and we actually proposed a reinterpretation of the wall, which is shown down on the lower image, and which would allow us some, views and some connectivity between the Riverwalk itself and our new project. And it was very well received by the San Antonio Landmarks Review Commission. This is an image of our building, which is under construction, by the way. I didn't mention that, it's not completed, but with the revised, the interpretation of the Hugman wall, and we actually are reusing the stone that has been removed from the existing wall. The building itself, there were some challenges. It's a very small site. And so one of the first things we did is undertook a view shed study. And because this is a residential project, again, another apartment building, it's a 15-story apartment building. And we wanted to make sure that the views that we had available to us from this really very special downtown site would be, available to the fullest to the residents. And so these are view sheds, which basically are taken at different levels. And so they basically give you an idea of what the best and the maximum kind of distant views that you would get from these different floor levels. And obviously, as you move through the different levels, you'll see that they vary wildly. And so, you know, when you're thinking about a tower project, you're thinking, okay, which way is the good view, right? Well, in this case, it's like all over the place. It's like, depending on, you know, what floor you're going to live on, right? And so we developed a series of floor plates that kind of basically addressed themselves to these different views at these different levels. And generated an interesting form. So this is an example of here we are at level 5. Here we are at level 9. You can kind of see how the plates shifted, and the views are acknowledged as you go up in different ways. It's subtle, but it's there, and so it's a driver for us on this project. And so here's how the building stacks up. We have down at the bottom, we have the river walk. I talked about the wall. The stone wall is made of the old stone that Hugman, originally devised during the 1930s. And then we have a couple of levels of restaurant space, and then 2 levels of automated parking, which I'll talk about just briefly in a few minutes. And then above that is an amenity level. And then we have the apartment units, which go up to level 15. Another view. This gives you a good idea of how the river walk on the right-hand side, which is down in this area here, relates to the streets of downtown San Antonio. This is a lower level floor, which interfaces with the river walk. We have outdoor seating, and you can see the wall, the heavy black lines that are drawn there. That's the old stone wall where the old wall was exactly. And then we have our street level, which is above that, which has the parking entrance, which is car elevators. So this is the ground floor essentially. And this is the amenity levels, which is up on level 5, actually level 4, sorry. An interesting thing here is the columns, the structural columns, really were set by the automated parking floors below. So when we got to the tower levels, we had to move those columns to be able to relate to the tower floors. We didn't want those columns coming up just randomly through people's apartments, right? So, so it looks like this. So this is the level 4 amenity deck, and you can see the apartment units starting up above. Another aspect of this, another constraint, being in a very unique location, is to relate to the buildings next door. The one on the left is called the Whitty Building, a beautiful old 1890s building, classical. And, you know, we obviously didn't want to copy anything like that or even attempt to do that, but we did want to acknowledge the proportions of some of the windows. And so this is a little study of how we did that. And this is what it looks like. So the ground floor is lobby, and we have parking entry in the middle, which is basically 2 garage bays that you can pull your car into. And then you go up into the levels 2 and 3, that's all automated. And so your car is basically taken up by, and this is a picture of how that looks, how these cars kind of all sort of in a kind of like one of those puzzles that we used to have that you can move around and make different words and so forth. The system is automated. It's completely autonomous and basically robotic. And so your car winds up going on a little tray like this, and then gets moved around by a robot that sits underneath it. And this is a view of our building, which is under construction. They're pouring concrete up at level 4 actually today. And you can see the green swath that's to the left of it is the river. And that's it. So Paul, I want to turn it back over to you. And if there are questions or anything like that, I'd be happy to answer any discussion. But thank you again for inviting me. It's been a lot of fun putting this together, and a real pleasure to be here. I think you're on mute, Paul.
I'm definitely on mute.
That happened.
Move my location.
Right.
You know, one question I have, can you talk a little bit, you said it very quickly, but I was sketching here and I was looking at those columns that were placed because of the parking needs, and then they shift in them. I mean, what? That's quite a structural feat, if I understand my engineering a little bit. So can you talk a little bit about when that occurred and when you decided that in the process?
Yeah, sure. I think, you know, one of the site is so small that we couldn't do a conventional parking garage here, either above or below grade. There just wasn't enough room to ramp up. You know, if you're driving into a parking garage, typically there's a ramp that you would drive up. Well, we couldn't even make that work. It would have been just too steep. So we moved to the automated system, but in doing so, then it became so important to get the structure extremely efficient and very, you know, columns very well placed, so that we could optimize the number of cars we could fit into our automated parking garage. And so this usually it's more of a negotiation between, like when we do projects with below grade parking, there's a column grid, and it's largely based on a parking module, if you will. And you know, but there's some latitude there. I mean, you know, when we then start looking at the tower floors, we want to optimize this structure for the apartments, to be able to get the right kind of layout and not have columns in people's dining rooms and things like that. So there's a negotiation there, and usually, you know, both sides give a little bit. But when you do an automated parking garage, the whole idea of it is just maximum efficiency, and the cost of the equipment is so high that you really want to get a perfectly beautiful grid, beautiful structure that is optimized for that use. And so we went, you know, obviously we were a little bit conflicted about how to handle the tower, thinking, okay, there's going to be some major compromises on the apartment levels, but working with our structural engineer, we were able to eliminate a lot of it by just, you know, tilting, twisting the columns and getting them to kind of splay outward or into demising walls, that kind of thing, to be able to you know, optimize. So go back. So this shows the sort of basic grid of the lower levels, and then I'll go up to like a typical floor here. So you should look at that, because you can see now how the columns kind of follow the perimeter of the floors.
I really like that. I like the way that they're exposed. So you call it the amenity floor, where there's some activity and open space, but then it's also a way for you to expose the structural gymnastics of the building. So I think that's a really interesting and architectural, but also structural image. It just shows how you achieved it. I didn't say this before for the others, but you know, if you want to ask a question, I'm happy to manage them. But we're a small group, so you know, if you want to use that function to raise a hand or something, and I'm happy to call on you. We have a question. Someone's raising a hand there. It looks like it's Molly who has a question.
Hi, I actually have two questions. One's really quick. How much does it cost to like live there? Like baseline? Like
Hmm.
just out of it just looks like very like we saw Ferraris. So I think that's like a universal question here.
Yeah. Well, the I think, Austin is getting to be a much more expensive city, um, because there's so many people that are moving here and buying real estate, and they're paying top dollar, and it's driving the cost up. San Antonio is not that way. San Antonio hasn't experienced that yet. And so San Antonio and Austin are very different in terms of their cost of living, especially for housing. So this project in San Antonio is going to be, considered to be, the kind of height of luxury, if you will. And I think, a one bedroom apartment in our building in San Antonio might cost, maybe it's $1,800 a month, where in the Austin building, the tall one I just showed you, an apartment would probably rent for like $2,500 a month for a one bedroom. So quite a big difference. Does that give you an idea
Yes,
of?
thank you. I was also wondering, going back to the view shed diagrams you showed for like views from each floor. I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit on how you like get that diagram, like how you get um,
Mhm.
the shape, like the shape. Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So basically, you put yourself at a certain point in this urban environment, and in our case, where our building site, and you put yourself at a certain height, and then you basically just cut a plane through everything that you see, everything that's in your field. And so different buildings, other elements will intercede and will block off parts of your view shed. And so the idea is that that you could get a sense of what your overall experience is of your outside your window, of your views out, by understanding what these view sheds are. Because in the urban landscape, you have tall buildings that will block your view and will change your field of vision, and then you'll have these openings that will allow you to get this vista, this long view out, and maybe even see the horizon. And so understanding what that's like for a particular given, locale is important. And it's not often that we would use a technique like this, but typically the views are much broader, just generally, especially if you're high. Like if you're above everything, you're above the entire urban landscape, you wouldn't need to worry about it too much. But here you're kind of nested down in a very congested location, and it really starts to matter a lot.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? I'm
Sure.
sorry, Molly. I don't want to cut you off. Is that good, Molly? She says thumbs up. You worked the scale of the building. Was there a discussion in terms of the parking, where the parking went? Because of the flooding, it had to be up. And so there's an opportunity for the first couple of stories. It doesn't have the same kind of engagement with the street. And your analysis of the beginning of the project with the Hugman plan and the walls that you used is kind of, it's almost like Back Bay. It's like 3-4 stories, low, very residential. And so I just wondered when those discussions happen with the developer and who you're working for. And, there's a scale to this, but behind those openings are cars, right? So,
Right.
so not shops.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes. That's right. Let me go to one of the street views. I mean,
That one is
so parking, above grade parking is very common in this area, and one of the reasons is because we have rocky soil quite a bit in Central Texas, at least, and it's expensive to go below grade. The other general issues that we are still a car environment here, changing a good bit in Austin, but certainly not in San Antonio yet. So, I mean, I did, have several conversations with our owner client about not having any parking, about maybe doing an arrangement with somebody else that already had some parking, a parking garage, an old parking garage maybe. But they didn't feel they could rent the apartments without having some parking on site. So we went to pretty extraordinary lengths to make this work with the automated system and so forth. But I think if you're asking about scale and why alternatives maybe about putting it below grade, we could have done that. We could have gone even further down below the river level and put this parking, minus 2, minus 3. Certainly could have done that. It would have been very costly. So it kind of comes down to economics.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions from our gallery?
Hi, Tony here. It doesn't look like, from one of the drawings, it doesn't look like you're the tallest building along this river. Are you? Is this the tallest building?
Not at all. We're not. And I think that last image kind of shows that a little bit. So there are older hotel buildings that have been built over the years that are taller. And interestingly enough, this site had been thought to be a site that shouldn't have any height on it at all. And I'm not sure exactly why, but the zoning here was for a lower building, and we actually went through a process where we actually got more height, and we kind of maxed out at 15 stories with the zoning revisions. They just wouldn't support greater height here on this particular site. Some of these zoning rules and some of these planning principles are maybe a little bit antiquated. Maybe there were reasons 30 years ago, 20 years ago for certain rules, and it's hard for some cities like San Antonio to keep abreast of changes that are happening all over, and cultural changes and technological changes. It's very, very difficult. Their code is they will acknowledge is antiquated, but they don't have a mechanism easily to change parts of the code. So we were held down to 15 stories on this project.
At least they didn't make you slant one side of the building.
Exactly. Yeah, good. Yeah. Right.
But Brett, you did shift parts of the building, which I think, it's interesting. What's similar to your projects, I guess, even though the form is different, is this kind of shifting that provides some interest. And, I'm always curious about being an architect myself and talking to students when you kind of have to tighten up that complexity because of cost or for reasons of simplifying an overall construction package. How far do you fight and push for that in terms of your initial concepts when you're working on these, where you realize this provides a shift, but do we do it?
Yeah. And I get comments every once in a while from other developers that, well, it'd been great if you had just made it straight. Why did, they don't get it at all. But in this case, there were, formal reasons, obviously. I mean, you can see how the balconies are available at certain places and not others. And that has to do with the view sheds and so on and so forth. But I think, we obviously have to have great clients, and this group is fantastic. And all 3 of the projects I showed you were done for really very, very great clients that kind of got it and kind of were willing to go with certain things. That's not always the case, obviously, and that's one of the frustrations of being an architect. And we have projects where we don't, we propose things and they don't get accepted. So, you also have to technically, you have to know how to do it. You have to, if you propose something like this, where you are doing shifts and so forth, you have to know how to, pretty quickly, you have to be able to tell your owner and your consultants and your contractor, okay, here's how we can make that work. So that also helps. If you can be confident about it and have the answers, I think you're going to have a much better chance.
Good, thank you. Any other questions for Brett from our audience? Everybody's happy?
Okay, well, good. Well, it's been fun, Paul. Thank you. And we're right at almost an hour, and
We thought about, I get.
that's always, that's a good amount of time to talk about architecture.
And I guess the one thing I wrote down an early question for me, and I think if I can try on people's patience, it may be a hard one, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I thought of it, Brett. And there was a photograph of the Independent that you had that had I really liked the mailbox, the free floating mailbox schemes. And what occurred to me when I looked at the mailboxes is it's like the facade of a small building, right? That if you look at the actual photograph and it's in the Independent and making them freestanding and not a corner that you have to go to in the building, I think that's brilliant. But then I looked at I think you'll find that, I don't know where I saw it. It was one of those lobby shots, I think. It looked like the elevations of the building, right?
Interesting. Hadn't thought about that.
But
For me, and this is that shot you're talking about, I thought more about Donald Judd than anything, just this idea of this sort of pristine boxes. Obviously, this is nowhere near achieving that level of elegance and simplicity, but just the idea that something so basic could actually become something interesting, in a bigger space.
Right. No, I think it animates the lobby. I really like this, and I guess the reason I wanted you to look at it is I was thinking about the scale of the development and things that you're used to dealing with in terms of how the dollars work and whether a development happens and whether it's a good investment and how the money works and the things that I think all cities struggle with, which is providing adequate housing that has to be subsidized in some way by either developments like this or other sources of funding where you see yourself and and we get this question from students, but also we think about it. Everyone's entitled to, the basic housing rights, and the places are quite beautiful. And so I just wonder, knowing the cities a little bit better than we do where you work, Brett, how does Austin or San Antonio, how do they address some of the disparities in those?
Well, they don't, and they haven't been able to here in Austin, particularly. San Antonio, I don't think San Antonio is, again, it's a little more affordable there already, although they do have, obviously they do have affordability issues, but not at the level that we have here in Austin at all. And of course, other cities have. But the city of Austin really has great intentions, and they talk about building housing. We, all these projects, the two projects I showed you in Austin were contributed heavily to the affordable housing fund that the city has. So we're talking millions of dollars that go into that fund from a project like this one, the Independent. But and those funds are accumulating. But the city of Austin doesn't have the expertise and hasn't been able to develop a mechanism to be able to design and locate land and you know, procure architectural services, hire contractors, and build buildings. They can't, for whatever reason, they don't have the expertise, and they can't find the expertise, so they're struggling. So far there's been just very little built. It's pretty sad. We've had some developers that have attempted to do it, but not nearly at the level of affordability. I think that where it needs to be, you know, workforce housing, we have a little bit of that, but it's not true affordable housing. So I really fault our city leadership here in Austin. There's just too much politics, and you know, we have our council is basically elected by neighborhood groups that are around the periphery of downtown Austin, and of course they don't want to see any affordable housing in their neighborhood because they consider it to be a detrimental thing to the the housing value. So there's a lot of talk, but very little action here. So we need somebody to step up to the plate on our leadership side and say, okay, we're going to do this. Yeah, so pretty sad.
Yeah, it's well said. Well, maybe Brett, at some point you'll take up that mantle. I think the projects you're showing us, they're very different, and in some ways, you know, they present a very different building type. Like I love the concrete core and the scissor stairs that wrap on themselves and provide two means of egress in one hole. And so I really like those kinds of things that I saw in your plans. And
thank you.
Maybe you'll come back and share with us when the San Antonio project. Absolutely love to. We have other projects coming along too. So anyway, but it was really fun to show you these three, and I hope everything goes well for the rest of the semester up there. Great. Same to you. And thank you again. So a big shout out to Brett and his team for putting it together. Thanks, Brett.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank all of you for joining us, and keep yourselves informed. We'll be sending out something in the end for the next series of speakers as well on our series. And Brett, again, it's a pleasure. And I'm looking forward someday to seeing that skyline behind you.
Please come visit. It's beautiful here right now. So
great. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great.
Bye, guys.